Hey guys, how's it going? Zan Barksdale here with Catching-101. Excited to have today's guest on Catching-101 TV. He probably needs no introduction. I imagine if you're following my channel or me on social, my email, you're probably familiar with Tom Griffin, the head coach at Carson Newman. He's spoken at Catcher-Con every year. He's at the ABCA convention every year, a really well-respected catching coach and a guy who I look up to and admire. And excited to get him on here and talk a little bit of catching. But kind of before we do, Tom, for the people that maybe are finding you for the first time, would you just give a little bit of background about yourself and what you're doing and kind of where you came from?
Well, yeah, Zan, first of all, great to see you. And it's an honor to be here with you because those were very kind words. But I look up to you, man. I've told you this 1,000 times. I think what you've done for the catching world, it's what changed it. Catcher-Con basically was the first, it was the ignition towards what we're seeing in catching right now. You provided a platform and showed the importance of it, and then the people you brought in and the way you went about this exploded the position. And I think, in all honesty, it's what created the success for a Tanner Swanson, to be quite honest with you. You know, Tanner's done a phenomenal job. You were the one to put him on the map and the course, man. And
I'd
so
love
you've
to
done
take
that for a
credit, but
lot.
I'm not going to go that far. I'd love to take credit for him, but he's
Well,
done a fantastic job.
he's a tremendous talent, but you provided the platform. I'm a native of New Jersey. Went to school at Tennessee Wesleyan in Athens, Tennessee. When I graduated there, I was fortunate to get the head job at Tusculum College in Greenville, Tennessee. Was there 9 years. Rightfully was fired from that job, which is one of those punch in the mouths, but it was deserved. And it helped me to redirect my purpose in life. Came here to Carson Newman as an assistant for a couple years, 1 year at a high school at Morristown East, and then was fortunate to get hired here at Carson Newman as the head coach.
Well, you've definitely, been around the block. And one of the reasons I wanted to have you on specifically in today's episode, and people who have probably read the title, the kind of theme of what we're going to talk about today is, how has catching changed in the past 5 years or so? And you kind of spoke a little bit about that with, conventions and different things. But I want to talk about, what has changed, what's remained the same. And we can go into more detail about each area specifically, whether it be receiving, blocking, throwing, the coaching side of it or whatnot. But like I said, one of the reasons that I wanted to have you on is because, and I did mention, I admire you because you're a student of the game. You're a continual learner. You love to learn. Every year at the ABCA convention, of all the presentations, how many do you watch?
Everyone but Sundays.
Everyone.
We leave Sunday morning. Everyone.
Yeah. And that was the answer I knew you were going to say. You watch everyone. You've got a notebook full of notes. You do the same thing at Catcher-Con. You're just as eager to learn as maybe somebody who's attending their first convention, which I think is awesome. I think a lot of people kind of go and show up and they kind of, just want to be there and show their face. But you're everything you go, you're there to learn, and you implement new things. So kind of with that said, and I know you kind of, maybe touched on it a little bit, but what are some of the main areas that you think have changed in catching in the last 5 years or so? And like I said, we can get into more detail about specific ones, but just overall kind of the landscape of catching, how do you think it's changed and maybe why do you think it's changed?
Well, the one reason it's changed, obviously, is social media. I think the amount of great instructors that are out there, the number of them has increased, which is great because it gives us more opportunities to spread the knowledge. I remember growing up as a coach, and Coach Guzzo, if you remember him at Old Dominion,
Mm-hmm.
he was kind of the catching guru. He was the guy. So anytime you went to ABCA, like Coach Guzzo was the catching guy. Well, now, and there were a couple others, but now, you could list a ton of guys who are exceptional instructors on catching. So it's far-reaching. And I think that's good. I think that helps catchers in all parts of the country and really the world who are involved in baseball. So social media has been a big part of that, and the instructors. ABCA and the way that has expanded its spokes of the wheel has been tremendous with some of these smaller circuits that they're doing now in the fall. As we've mentioned, I think CatcherCon has opened up the window to the specificity and the importance of catching. That's opened the eyes to a lot of coaches as well. So to me, that's been the biggest change, is the way we can market these ideas and these instructors.
Yeah, I think it's hard to argue that. I remember when I started my coaching career in fall of 2006, so it's, almost 15 years ago, there was very, very little information available. I think you had a DVD that came out, Catch, Block, Throw was probably in 2007-ish, maybe. It was around that time. There were very few resources. So social media is a big one. And, I think it's really impacted all of baseball, not just catching, but all of baseball. I think back to the days when I played, the analogy that I always talk about, and example I always use, is just stretching. Just what your pregame or pre-practice preparation was. If you watch somebody in the year 2000 and you watch somebody in the year 2020, it's completely changed. I mean, we're doing dynamic stretches. We have bands. I mean, every player has their own tools. So I definitely think social media is a big part of that. And I think it's just giving a lot of people a voice, to start sharing their ideas.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. Just what you talked about there, it was the stretching part, just the beginning of that. I mean, and how we've treated catchers. In the 70s and 80s, the catcher would practice, would have to catch all the bullpens. And then when BP started, we didn't have batting cage, the rollaway cage. We didn't have that in high school and college. So basically what the catcher did is I'd catch a bullpens. We'd do our team defense, and you got the gear on, and then BP would start. So I'd go grab a bucket and put the bucket right next to me, and I'd catch BP for our guy and catch him and drop him in the bucket. And everybody got the hit. And then, all right, hey, Griff, go get your gear off. You get the hit. So I'd get up there to hit 2 rounds of 5. All right, let's pack it up. You're like, are you kidding me? That's it? But that's what we did because we didn't have backs, the rollaway cages. So, how we go about treating our catchers and developing them. And then in some cases, if you want to say preserving them so they can last longer, the health of them, the stretching, as you mentioned, the conditioning aspects of things, the things in the off season, how we're developing the person in our strength program has changed as well. And you're in that line also. And boy, that has really navigated. In the 70s, you didn't touch weights. In the 80s, Nautilus became big, machines. And it was still like, that was just for a little bit of toning, but don't want to bulk up. Well, look where we are now. Mm-hmm. We've certainly have evolved in that way as well with the catchers and players in general.
Yeah, no doubt. The strength training and the physical aspect of it, whether it be stretching or the prehab or rehab or whatever, I mean, the strength and conditioning world has changed quite a bit. And I think that's had a big impact on just the way the game is played, not even more broadly than, just the catcher. But I want to, like I said, I think we've kind of set the stage for how things have changed. Now I'd kind of like to maybe get a little more specific about, what things have changed, what's not changed. And so when you think to your program, whether it be the way you recruit catchers, the way you coach them when you get them on campus, the way you teach receiving, the way you teach throwing, the way you teach blocking, I'd like to, and I don't want you to unpack all that at once because it's a lot, but what would you say are some of the main takeaways that if you look back at Coach Griffin 5 years ago, and you said, "Man, I can't believe I was doing that. Now I've kind of changed and shifted gears."
Great question. I think one that comes right off the top is the one knee with runners on. That certainly has changed. We've had guys in the past who have been maybe guys that sat in their stance on their rear end to get as low as possible. And some guys would drop to a knee with nobody on. Never was done with a runner on. And that has certainly evolved and changed what we do with our catchers. The receiving aspect has changed also because I think there was a time, Zan, if you remember when we were catching, it was catch everything and stick it right there.
Mm-hmm.
and catch it and let the umpire see. Well, now we've seen that manipulating the pitch and working and buffering it and stopping it and trying to get it back into this zone, that has evolved quite a bit. You know, the pitch on the inside part, I was always taught, and to a certain degree still today, above the knee is to be at 12 o'clock with my thumb.
Mm-hmm.
And now we see more of the flattening the thumb at the 6 o'clock and working it in. You know, there's still some guys that'll get this way, but it's changed my thinking in some aspects, especially that low pitch that you got to get the thumb underneath. You can't always stay this way. I think the other thing that's changed is so many ideas that have come out through the different instructors. It's opened up my toolbox, not only in the words I'm going to use to instruct, but also some of the techniques. And so now my toolbox might have been a hammer and a screwdriver. Well, now I've added a couple other tools to that because there's so much more involvement in this position and the amount of instructors that are out there that are doing things that we can learn from. And sometimes it's just reiterating what we're doing. We're getting an okay. It's, you know, that's good. Other ones are doing it. But also we're hearing some cue words. Like I know at Catcher-Con, every time I hear a guy talk about receiving, I'm writing down new cue words and new things I can say to our catchers that it might resonate with them versus what terms I've used in the past.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, man, there's a lot of good things there, and I want to talk about a few different things, but I kind of want to start going back to one thing you said in the beginning when you talked about the one knee stances. You know, those are that's taken off. That's like the hot thing in catching right now. It seems like everybody wants to try it or everybody's doing it. You watch the video. I feel like at least once a week, I see a new video of a big leaguer who's trying to, you know, wherever he's trying to convert and change. One of the things that I'm kind of interested to hear what you say, and I've got an opinion on it, and maybe I'll let you go first, but how much do you think has changed about there being, you know, a framework or a foundation that most catchers kind of follow versus now a lot more of an individual approach, where it seems like a lot of guys kind of, you know, the one knee is right for this guy, but it's not for that guy. This guy is still a traditional stance here. This guy throws a little bit different. I kind of feel like things used to be a lot more rigid, and now there's a lot more flexibility or fluid where guys are just, you know, open to try new things. I mean, do you kind of see the same thing?
It's a great point, man. We just had a discussion with some pitching guys, you know, these Zoom calls and listening to pitching guys. And it's something I battle with as a coach, and I think as a teacher. When I grew up, you came somewhere and it's like, hey, this is how you do it. You learn how to do it that way. You adapt to this, and that's just the way it is.
Mm-hmm.
I think we've learned as instructors, you know, today, you know, whether it's today's kids or not, they're kids, but allow them to maybe navigate their own path. Just be there to guide them. And then maybe when things go wrong, they'll ask questions, and then you've opened their minds up. We do that. In a lot of ways, I think as coaches here, we do that. But we also do have now we got to start with the basics. We got to learn the fundamentals of this first before we start to allow some of the freedom. So all of our guys, when they come in, even if they are one knee guys, I still want them to know the standard stance, what we would call standard stance. In our drill work, they'll do them all because then we may find more of a comfort level for certain guys. But I do want some parameters. I do want some, hey, this is what we've got to do with our catchers. To me, the confusing thing is there is a lot out there, and the information they're coming in with, we got to make sure we're somewhat on the same page. Our teams have a culture and rules that we need to stay within. If I allowed every kid to kind of want to do their own thing, I don't want to really go to class on Fridays, coach. Well, you can't. These are certain things you have to get done. The same thing for me when it comes to the fundamentals of this position and what we're going to do with our terminology and our cue words, that we're kind of staying on the same path with the idea that we still want to see these guys progressing.
Hmm. I like the way you said that, and kind of the way I was thinking about it was the other day I was in a conversation with somebody on Twitter, and I feel the same way you do, first of all. And I tried to express that in a tweet. And when you have 240 characters, sometimes things get left out. You just don't have enough room.
Right.
I think there definitely needs to be a framework and a foundation. I think you have to teach something. I think, yes, there should be individualization. Guys should, my anatomy is different than your anatomy, and you can get in a one knee stance and I can, and this and that. But at the end of the day, I think if you should be able to ask your catchers, hey, what is Coach Griffin's? What is Carson Newman's? What is their
Yeah.
catching philosophy? And I think the catcher should
Yeah.
be able to respond. And I guess where I'm going with that is it may be a long way around a long answer to a short question. But I've seen a lot of people online kind of talk about, each pitch is unique, every umpire is unique, every arm slot's unique. And while they're correct, there is a lot of, individual variables. You can't plan for every variable all the time. Even if you just plan for the handedness of the pitcher, the handedness of the batter, and the umpire's strike zone. I mean, that right there are four variables that can change. Now you're talking about different pitches. I mean, you can't have a different setup for a right-handed slider on a left-handed hitter with this umpire, So I think you need a framework and a foundation. And I think that's one important thing that a lot of catching coaches need to continue to maybe think about. While yes, hey, work with the guys, like you said, let them kind of find their own path, but also kind of guide them in the right direction too, and kind of let them know what the end result needs to be, and make sure we're doing our job to guide them, to the correct place.
Great point. And by the way, I'm taking notes, man, because you just talked about something. There's different variables, and I had never thought of it in that way. But there are different variables occurring in the game that you can't prepare for. And the age of the kid, I love listening to the pro guys. They're phenomenal, but they're dealing with such a small percentage of the catchers. The true nuts and bolts are the guys that are working with little league, middle school, high school. I mean, that's the majority of the players,
Mm-hmm.
and they're limited in their skill set. And so if we taught a kid that, hey, with a right-handed batter and a pitcher, we're going to go on our right knee down to open up the window. And then with a left-handed batter, we're going to drop the other. Hey, let's make sure he's in a traditional, whatever stance, and just catch the ball.
Mm-hmm.
Just make sure we can catch the ball. And so the age appropriate instruction, and I'm sure I would do this too. I would probably, with all the information, try to make a sixth grader who has a tough enough time just to stick in a stance to go through all these different things of how we're going to do certain things. We got to keep it basic and keep it age appropriate, and not to get advanced, because he's got to get the fundamentals down. And you need that structure. And I like the way you said there's different variables that play into it. Let's not lose the basics.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. Like I said, and that's talking about stances, whatever. You've kind of alluded to receiving a couple times, and I'm curious to see your thoughts. Like you mentioned earlier, there's been a lot of, I'd say, change over the past couple of years, and I attribute that to the hardware and the technology that's available. In the big leagues, they have TrackMan, they have Hawkeye, they have radar systems. I mean, they might even move to a electronic strike zone at some point. If I was a betting man, I'd say that's going to happen sooner than later, relatively. So there's unbelievable technology at that level that we don't necessarily have. Every high school field, every college field doesn't have resources like that, but we see the same techniques trying to be taught at the younger levels. And hey, I think there's a valuable place to teach the guys how to manipulate the ball and how to move the ball and how to work it back to the middle of the zone and all those things.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm just kind of curious what your thoughts are on, kind of how that relationship works between what the guys are doing at the big league level to how does that directly apply to you?
Yeah. I mean, you talk about evolving. Do you remember? I don't know if you remember this. When I was growing up, we caught the pitch, the low
Mm-hmm.
pitch, like this.
I was taught that when I was little. Yeah.
Right? I mean, we were caught like this. We were catching. I was watching old videos of Jerry Grody. I used to watch Jerry Grody with the New York Mets, being a New Jersey guy. And the stance was, heels off the ground and catch the low pitch like this. I mean, look where we've evolved to. You know, the videos that we get now, watching videos, and it's been a good involvement on how to catch things better. If we think about where the glove goes, it brings my elbow in, and not a very athletic position. So we've learned to kind of keep the elbow out a little bit. Like I said, I think more umpires are hesitant for us to pull ball back in. When you get into high school and you see kids that aren't as strong and as fluid as we watch on the major league level or the high levels of college baseball, the smoothness that they do it is much different than the high school kid. And that's where the umpires say, hey, quit pulling that baseball, just catch it. Let me catch it. You know, and I think that's what's important, is just catch the baseball right now. And if we work in the framework of however you want to think of the strike zone, we used to talk about the circle, and just catch things and basically keep it inside the circle. You know, the old catch the outside part of the ball, so that we're at least giving the umpire a window and keeping everything inside that window. I think that's the basic that I would work from. And as the level of the player increases, the strength, all the factors physically, then that may become more of a smoother transition with the receiving.
I think one of the interesting things kind of along those lines are just how receiving has become the sexy thing. You know, like when you watch kids post on Twitter or Instagram, it used to be them throwing them, you know, they still take swings, do whatever. You used to never see a clip of a kid receiving, you know,
Oh,
and now that's all you see is you see guys manipulating the ball. And I think receiving has become sexy. I know one thing I try to do at CatcherCon every year, and some years I've done a little bit better job than others, is I try to diversify the topics as much as possible, because I don't want 8 guys that all talk about
yeah.
blocking and nothing's covered. I try to cover as many different topics as possible. And just in a couple of years, the first year or two, or maybe even 3, everybody wanted to be the throwing guy. You know, like, I want to
Yeah.
talk about throwing. Throwing is what I'm going to talk about. That's what's hot. That's what, you know, I've got my deal. And it's evolved to where everybody wants to be the receiving guy now. You know, everybody wants their presentation to be on
Yeah.
receiving. And it's become a lot more popular. You know, I think as coaches, I would say that's one thing that has not changed is coaches have always said they want the best receiving catcher, and everything else is kind of secondary behind that. But I feel like we've kind of talked out of both sides of our mouth. I think you may say that, but at the end of the day, you know, you go to a showcase and you watch a kid, and the kid that gets recruited is the kid that throws real well. You know, I think that's
Yep.
that's true. But I do think that, you know, the receiving part is becoming sexier, and I think coaches I think they're more aware of it. Again, I don't know exactly how it's affecting the recruiting classes, but I'm curious to get your thoughts. If you look at kids any differently now as you did maybe a couple of years ago. Again, I know receiving's always been important, but I feel like it's much more important now than it was, you know, in the recent past.
Yeah. You know, the showcase aspect, I mean, really, we will watch a kid in a bullpen setting or in the game miss a couple balls, but the fact we wrote down he threw a 192, like, we're interested in that
Mm-hmm.
throw. I mean, it still has the mark on it for everyone. And I wish in our showcases we would get a machine out there and just feed the machine and let them catch it and do some block and recovers to see some of the athleticism versus the throwing. Because I think we know that if a kid can't throw, we can stop the running game because the pitcher on the mound is good. And like you said, statistically, we have shown the importance, the amount of times, how important catching the ball is. Yeah, in recruiting, that's going to be number one. You know, can he catch the ball? When we train, I know some guys have talked about, you know, 90% of the game is the receiving. For me, I still like, and we still train everything. And yeah, do we catch more? Of course, because they catch bullpen. So they're always going to get more work in receiving. But when we're doing our drill work, we'll do equal time with throwing, because they do it every day, receiving and blocking. We'll do that every day, as well as some other things that are a part of the game, the specialty plays. And I've heard guys say, well, you know, how many times do you actually field the bunt and throw it to first or whatever? Not much. How many times is there going to be pop-ups? Not many in the course of the year that matter, but if we get a bunt down the third base line, bottom of the ninth, nobody on, and we get that ball and throw it down the line, that play magnifies itself, just like the 1-1 pitch that we drop out of the zone. We don't know what play changes the course of events. Just like in life, we don't know what decisions are going to really impact our life. To me, they're all important. Just like our football program, they work on offense and defense a lot, but they work on special teams because if they're not prepared for that onside kick, it's that one play that knocks you out of the ballgame. So we want to make sure that we're working on everything. And I also think when we're doing that, we're creating better athletes and better movers behind the dish because we're getting them out of what we would call the comfort zone of just receiving the ball. And I think anytime we can make them better athletes and better decision makings, not just on receiving or blocking, I think you're getting a more well-rounded product.
Yeah. I agree with that. I think you're right there. I think that kind of hits the nail on the head with a lot of things. You do see a lot more presentations or information put out there about, like you said, the training economy, and we're going to receive 88% of the time, and we're going to throw 4% of the time, and you're going to block 6%,
Right.
whatever the numbers add up to. Even though you're only going to have to field a handful of bunts over the course of a season, I think that's important to remember. Like you said, they're not bunting in the top of the first with nobody on and one out. They're bunting in the bottom of the ninth when it's important, and it's an important part of the game. So I've always believed you got to spend a lot of time on the other aspects. And yeah, if I had to look back at the days as me as a college coach, yeah, we definitely spent more time on receiving, blocking, and throwing, but that didn't mean we completely neglected the other stuff.
Right.
And that's one thing I think a lot of guys can definitely learn from and benefit from. Just the confidence, the athleticism. There's a lot of other things that are involved in making those other plays. That's not just receiving all the time.
Yeah. And I think when we were talking about the receiving, and it goes back again to what you said in the beginning, basically the pregame stretching and the stuff we do. The specific stretches we now have learned about the hips, the ankles, and realizing that, when a kid was struggling maybe receiving the ball, it mainly had nothing really to do with his ability to catch. It may have to do with he was thinking more about how his legs are on fire right now, or the fact that his ankles had no mobility in it and he couldn't move maybe a certain way and was restricted. We've learned that a good stretching program can make them better receivers. And we're focusing on just the catching of the ball, but we need to make sure we're focusing on his body and assessing, is there anything restricting him? We got to pay attention to that.
Yeah, that's an area that I think I've tried to pay a lot more attention to the past few years, just the hip mobility and ankle mobility. Again, I hate to sound like an old man, like back in my day, but when I was playing, there was no hip mobility routine. There was no ankle mobility routine. And I think now guys are becoming much more aware of that, and just you're able to get into a better position, which is going to in turn allow you to throw better, receive better, block better, all those sorts of things. Let's talk about, we've talked about how the stances have changed and the receiving's changed. What about blocking? Have you noticed any changes that are kind of any blankets that are covering the blocking world that have changed? I've seen a few things. I think to me, it looks like guys are, again, a lot more flexibility and individualistic. Some guys are, blocking from one knee a lot more. But curious to hear what you think, what you've noticed over the past couple of years.
Well, I think the one more I think than anything is, I know we used to talk about the glove staying on the ground, connection of glove to ground. Well, now we're allowing our catchers to become more like infielders. We're letting them move their glove that they may get the pocket of the glove to the ball. So that's changed for me. I think the idea when we would block side to side, specifically.
Tom, can I cut you off there? Can I cut you off there and ask you? So that's something you agree with then, or you're teaching you guys now? It's okay to move your glove. It's okay to try to not catch it, but try to have better glove work than just catch it in your belly button.
Age appropriate. In camps, if I'm working with a little league middle school kid who's learning the position, no, not at all. glove stays down. We just make sure we have good posture with our body. If we see a kid whose ability to block and his athleticism is pretty good, sometimes what you'll notice anyway, Zan, is you'll see a kid's hands when the ball's over to the side. Naturally, he's just doing that and making the block, maybe not with his body, but because he does this and extends, he's able to get something on it. When you see that, you're like, uh-oh, good, that kid's natural. Now let's talk about the idea that sometimes our hands can be used. So more age appropriate, and I'd say more skill of that player allows us to talk about that. So we do talk about that. I think the other thing, we used to block on the sides, specifically arm side. We would always block with both knees getting to the ground. Drive the left knee, get to the ground, two, knees down. Well, now we do the one knee straight down, the other leg is straight, and not both knees going to the ground. We've allowed that more. I never did that before. The last couple of years, we've incorporated that. The body, we used to always talk about, cutting the angle down to the ball. Well, now you got some balls that you're actually going to replace your knees and go straight down versus coming forward. So understanding where the ball is to your body, of whether I'm going to fall forward or whether I'm going to basically kick back. I think guys understanding that helps them to deaden the ball a little bit and be able to recover it better than what maybe we've done with just the one way. And recognizing it, some balls, you're not going to go to your knees. You're going to stay up because the hop is going to be up. So reading the hops, I think, for us has changed. So those three areas with blocks, I think has evolved for me.
Let me ask you this. So I know the way that, things are being taught have changed some. And like you said, more things are maybe allowed now, if that's the right, allowed or accepted, maybe a better word. Have you noticed any result in, guys are better blockers, guys are able to extend their range, or guys are worse blockers? Maybe this is a trend that, hey, things are changing, but I don't think it's changing in the right direction. Or do you think guys, are able to have the same results with just maybe less strict rules, kind of what they have to do back there?
I think we're definitely more athletic back there. And it's because of the things we talked about, the training these kids are getting at a younger age, the body itself as these players is much different than 10, 15, 20, 30 years ago. They're different looking athletes. They've had more instruction. So I think the ability to block athletically is much better. I think the one knee stance for some of your older guys, I think has been helpful for guys as well, where normally they wouldn't get to balls or block because they were too stiff in their standard stance. The one knee has allowed them to make blocks. So I do think it has gotten better. And maybe we'll talk about this, but I think one of the things we haven't seen get better are the instincts for the game, and decision-making, I think, has gone this way. There's no doubt in my mind, in 30 years of coaching, the decision-making that goes on, the ability to communicate with your teammates, not only during the course of the play, but in between plays, has been a decline. No doubt.
Well, what do you think the reason for that is? I mean, and I've got a couple ideas on this too, and I'm sure you do as well. How much of that is going to be the individual player's fault? How much of that, can we put that responsibility on the coaches at younger ages, and maybe how much of it do we put just on the entire, I'd say, landscape of amateur baseball?
Yeah, that's a good one. I mean, we've got different theories on it. The landscape of baseball. Growing up, you played baseball. You didn't play 4 games in one weekend. Normally what you did, you played like a Monday, Tuesday, Thursday. That was it. Weekends, you didn't have games if you were playing Legion Ball or Babe Ruth or Big League, especially in the summer. Now they're playing so many games consecutively, there's not much going on during the week. You remember, I tell you what helped decision-making, a couple things. We watched the game. Back in Jersey, we didn't have cable TV. You had the Yankees and Mets on. That was it. And then there was the game of the week on Saturday. All of us watched that game of the week. Mel Allen's This Week in Baseball, watching those highlights. I mean, we watched it. We'd get a newspaper and have to look through the box score and can figure out the game by watching the box score. Reading the box score, you get an idea who hit, who struggled, whatever. So I think we watched the game more because we didn't have so many opportunities to watch it like we do today. And I think by watching the game, we learned more about instincts versus just playing it. The idea of going out and playing wiffle ball, you develop instincts. So I think what we were able to do without the distractions they have today, we had more instincts. We communicated more with each other because just technology we didn't have. I think that's what made it good. In high school, even in college, we did this. The coach with the bat, couple guys running, all right, nobody on. He'd hit the ball, and then it was go. We did that for an hour. Today, we feel like that's a bad use of time. Boy, you got to get – but wait a minute. That was happening, and I was getting a lot of practice with guys running home, and here comes the throw, and my decision-making of I got to play here or I don't have a play. That's because we were run through it so much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. I mean, I remember going to those drills. It's funny you mentioned that because you didn't know what was going to happen. You just like, oh man, please hit a pop fly to the right fielder. That's funny you say that. So, a couple of things that I want to kind of pick out about that. And I think this is one of my topics I kind of spoke on briefly at Catching-101 this year. Was I think kids this day and age, I think they watch just as many or more swings or pitches or plays, but I think they watch much less overall baseball games, and they see them out of context. If you scroll through your Twitter feed, I bet within the first 30 seconds you're going to see 10 or 15 dudes swinging, or depending on who you follow, maybe you're a pitching guy, you're going to see the nasty pitches breaking off, but you don't see them in context of what was the pitch before that, what was the pitch after that, how did he react, was there a runner on base, what was so I think you miss a lot of that. And like I said, I struggle to blame the players, because I think as a coach, our job is to take responsibility and to prepare them as best we can. I think that's probably one of the negative aspects of social media. I think there's a lot of great information shared. I think it's taken away from guys watching games because they get their fix watching a swing or watching a throw or a play or whatever it is. So I think there's less baseball IQ because of that. Another one, just the landscape of the college baseball amateur baseball. I'm with you. Like when I grew up, until I was 13 or 14, I think I might have had a fall season where there was 6 or 8 games, and then your spring season was, I don't know, 14 games. Over the course of a year, you played 20 games. And then as you got a little bit older, middle school, high school, it was a little bit more intense. Maybe you played summer ball, but our summer baseball was 30 games maybe, and now you have guys playing over 100 games. So what I think it's done is it's taken time away from practicing. Guys are their practice to play ratio has completely flip-flopped. I mean, not even close. So I think that's where you're getting a lot of the maybe the game awareness or the ball awareness or the game IQ. I think that's kind of shifted, and that's kind of one thing that I know a lot of guys who have coached for a long time feel exactly like you do. Man, the guys that I'm getting now, when they get to college, they just don't understand the game as much. Super talented players, much more physical, maybe much more developed, but the maybe the mental awareness just quite isn't there.
No, I agree. How about this? Catchers don't run bases. That's one of the things when they get here and they have to run bases, man, you talk about conservative. Their leads are about that big off of first, first to third. I mean, they're looking to you what to do. That the idea of they can't run the bases. And, as a catcher, I think, Zan, if you look at the best managers of the game, it's been, and a lot of times people point to catchers because they've had to take in everything going around them. Well, we eliminate the idea of base running because they don't run the bases. They get on, they get pulled off. And, the aspects of other things, we were talking about kids watching games. So during this, with our kids at home, once a week, we send them an assignment. And what we've done here last 2, we've watched the 72 World Series, the Reds in Oakland. Oh, it's a phenomenal World Series. But what it is, it's the highlights. It's Kurt Gowdy doing the highlights of each game. And they got to take notes. We did the 75 World Series, Red Sox and Reds. They had to take notes, bullet points, and send it in. And it's amazing. Some guys, phenomenal. They picked up things that were like, boy, that's what we wanted. The majority, they missed so many key things. Now, part of it is, I don't want to do this, so I'm just going to write it up and get it out. But I think some of it was, I don't know, the Reds won the first game 3-2. Okay, that was it. But no, what was more into it? And when you see some of the kids find some of those things, you're like, okay, that kid's got a little bit of an aptitude. That's what we're wanting. In recruiting, one of the questions we ask is, who's your favorite baseball team? Who's your favorite catcher? You're a catcher. I really don't have a favorite catcher. And baseball team, I don't watch a lot of baseball. Oh my gosh. Oh man, really? And it's
Red
like,
flag.
okay. Yeah, to me it is. Now, it doesn't mean you eliminate the kid, but I want kids to have other interests, go fish, hunt. But I do want you to watch the game, game one of the World Series. I want you to watch it. I don't want you to be watching, Ozarks when you can watch that anytime. Let's watch what's going on right now. And so you're right. I think that's a lot of factors into it. And you're right about this. It's up to us as coaches to direct them into this area and then have conversations about it. That's how we can help them grow. That's a good point.
Well, it's just an interesting time for baseball right now. I mean, like I said, with all the things going on, outside of the coronavirus situation, just the way that amateur baseball is played, the amount of games, number of games, the toll it takes on their body. Another thing that I've kind of seen a shift in over the past couple of years, and I'd say really within the past 5, maybe 10 years, I think a lot of players have more dedicated teams built around them. And I don't mean like the LeBron super team. I mean, like if I'm a high school kid and I live in Nashville, I have access to a strength coach, a hitting coach, a catching coach. I'm getting a lot more lessons. I have my own. I'm like a professional athlete, just on a smaller scale.
Yeah.
I've got it. My parents, my family has built a team around me to help me become, the best athlete I can possibly be. And I think with that, guys are focusing a lot earlier. That's maybe a different conversation for another day. But you're getting a lot more specificity, and the guys are becoming a lot more specific in what they do. So that's another kind of overall landscape thing that I've seen change in amateur baseball.
Big time. No, I agree. And you just talked about this as sports. I mean, we saw more multi-sport athletes. And now you do see it in certain areas of the country, and I think weather has a big part of that, obviously. In New Jersey, I felt like everyone either played football, baseball, basketball, baseball, wrestling, but the weather had something to do with that. The weather wasn't great up there, let's say, in the fall, like you can be in the Southeast region or West Coast maybe. But now we're seeing more specialization of just playing the game of baseball. We can argue that left and right, but we do like when we hear a kid is doing other sports and is involved in other things where he can get his mind off of this, because we don't want the kid coming here and the grind happens, if you want to call it the grind, and burnout happens. By the time they get to us, just like you said, they've had a team of people working with them their whole life, and then they get here, and if things aren't going exactly right, I'm burnt out. And boy, we see that a ton here. Yeah. No question.
Interesting concept for sure. Shifting gears as we're talking about things that have changed, what are maybe some things you think that haven't changed? Because again, I think it's easy to look at baseball and say like, oh man, things are changing. It's different this year than it was last year. And today's a different day than yesterday. And you got people, online that have new ideas and new theories. And you see the way that, even professional baseball jobs have changed. What are some things that maybe haven't changed specifically related to catchers? Is there anything you notice off the top of your head? I mean, maybe qualities you look for that, you've always looked for?
I think the toughness of the position. I think when you play catcher, it doesn't matter what era you play in, there's a certain degree of toughness. I mean, the position has a workload attached to it, unlike anyone else. And I know the pitcher throwing 80 to 100 pitches a game, that's taxing on the body, but he's going to get some rest. The toughness mentally and physically you have to have playing this position will never change. And I think that's something that's very consistent, no question about it. I think that, the flexibility of the position, it does create more flexible guys. And even if you're not flexible, if you're doing it for a while, you then do develop maybe a little bit of looseness in the hips. And just because of where we are close to the ground, that's always going to be consistent for no other reason. For me, that's the biggest thing. The ability to catch, block, throw, as we've talked about this in the last 20 minutes, the development of it and the changes, those are the three factors that are going to matter. We talked about, guys that don't get to call their own game. That's a change, but I do think it's changing again because in talking with coaches, I think they're allowing that to happen more than, let's say, 5 years ago. I think they're instructing and teaching their catchers what the mindset and what they should do in calling a game. And I do think we're allowing more catchers to call a game. If the catcher shows interest in an investment in time, then I think coaches are more apt to at least let him do it for a little while. I think that has definitely starting to swing just a little bit the other way.
Yeah, I want to stay on that because that's an interesting topic that I'm personally interested in, but I know a lot of other people are interested in too. Now, you personally, you let your catchers call the game, correct?
Yes.
Have you always done that?
There's been times that we've called it based on the catcher, but I would say 9 out of 10, it's the catcher calling.
Okay. And I just want to give that, for reference. It seems like to me, looking from afar, and a lot of high school programs, the coach is calling the game. In a lot of college programs, the coach is calling the games. I see it more in I'd say the summer ball or the travel ball. I think to those type organizations and teams, winning is important because they want to win and the families want to win and get championships and the accolades and whatever. But I think it gets a little bit more lax in that regard there, where in the summer guys are more likely to be allowed to call their own game. And I think there's a time and place for both, to be perfectly honest. I think there's a great way to allow catchers to do it and develop and get better. But I completely also understand where, hey, this guy's in the last year of his contract and he feels like he's going to do a better job calling a game than a freshman catcher because he spent 8 hours looking at the scouting report this week and he's played the team for the past 4 years, So I get it, and I think that's changed. I think that's, it's a shift. So since you do allow your guys to call the game, what are some methods, or maybe what do you do to kind of help teach them for the guys who haven't maybe quite taken grasp of that yet? If you were giving advice to a coach that says, hey, I think I'm on board with letting the catcher and pitcher call their own game, what can I do to ensure that I get the most out of them and they do the best job possible?
Well, I was going to ask you this. You've coached USA baseball and you see the best of the best of high school catchers. Do the majority of them, do they tell you they call their game or not?
It's a mix. I would say most of the time they do not. But again, I think it's a little bit different and might be a little bit out of context. So when I'm working with the guys in the summer, they've basically made Team USA, so they're the best of the best. They're with the best of the best. They may go to a small high school in a rural town in Florida, and their pitching staff is not what the USA pitching staff is going to be, so I think there is some differences there. But most of the guys don't call it. They all enjoy it. They all love it every chance they get. But I think the majority of the time they don't get to. With USA baseball, and again, each age group and each coach is probably different. There's a mixture going on, of who's calling it.
Yeah. I remember, and Zen, you're probably the same way, man. you're sitting there and you got that battle going. I got a really good hitter up, and you suggest the pitch, because that's all we do is suggest. Although I think at times I was basically telling them what to throw and don't shake me off. But that's a bad attitude. But you call that pitch and it happens. Oh man, I mean, that is such a good feeling knowing that was your decision to help that guy make that pitch. Unbelievable feeling. And you talk about a camaraderie that gets built with that. I think that was even more. So we spent time talking about all different philosophies of pitch calling. Just like everyone else, we talk about reading hitters. Where is the hitter's weakness? Read the body. How's his stance? What's his swing path like? What type of hitter? Is he a contact punch and Judy? Is he a big swinger? So that the type of hitter, we want to kind of figure out who this guy is, what his swing is like, and what does he have trouble with? Breaking balls? Is he a good fastball hitter? Inside, outside? So we want to read the hitter. That's first and foremost. It all starts with the pitcher's strength. So whatever the pitcher's strength is, man, that's what we're going with. Then we look at the hitters and the hitter's weakness. Then we talk about the situation of the game, what the hitter might be trying to do. We talk about the umpire and where is his zone. He's given us 2 balls off. Well, let's just stay out there and see if we can keep getting that pitch. And then we want to make sure we talk to our guys, don't let the best hitter on that team or the hottest hitter beat us that day.
Yeah.
We got to pitch around, we'll pitch around. We also remind our catchers that 68% of balls that are put in play are going to be outs. So attack the strike zone, and it's hard enough to hit the ball. So whatever you put down, if you just put a fastball down the middle, the pitcher ain't going to throw it there anyway. It's going to move off course. So it's hard enough, round ball, round bat. So don't go too kooky thinking about this thing. Just put numbers down, and chances are, you could look over, and if a monkey was in there pulling out a number and saying, do that, you might have a good game thrown.
Yeah.
So, and we've done this, Zan, you've done this. We're taking BP. This is how you show pitchers how easy pitching is, right? You get your infielders out there and you're throwing BP at 50 mile an hour and balls are getting hit. Hey guys, they didn't score off of me there. You just got to throw strikes. Well, to me, that's kind of true. I mean, It's kind of true. But your point is big, because I've had this discussion with guys who call their game. They're like, listen, coach, I'm supporting my family, Division I coach. I don't want to lose my job. And if I put it into that freshman's hand who's paying no interest in what we're doing, then I've got to take interest for him and call it. I never thought of it that way. I've always been like, oh, you guys are just, egos are into this. No, that is a bigger picture that I did not see. And I think you're absolutely right about that.
Well, I don't judge guys. They do it either way. I think there's a time and place for both. And I think inside each program, there's a time and place for both. So even if that guy wants to call the pitches, well, as soon as they start boat racing somebody and the score is 14-1, hey, now we give it to the pitcher and the catcher, let them take it over.
Yeah.
To me, it's kind of funny, or it reminds me of a story. You talking about base running earlier. I think pitch calling and base running are the same, because I had the same type of emotion where I didn't run bases in high school. Okay. I think I ran bases one time, and I was pretty fast, but I was a catcher. So, I just never ran. Well, there was one situation where I ran, I got picked off first. So I was like traumatized from that. Then I didn't run bases in junior college. And then when I got to Ole Miss, you got to run base, and it's like, oh crap. So you have this like moment like, oh my gosh, what am I supposed to do? And the same thing, I feel like a lot of guys are the same when they get used to the coach calling the pitch, and you just mindlessly look over, put down the pitch, mindlessly look over. And then when it's time for you to call it, you get in pro ball, you get in rookie ball, or you get to your college, and it's like, oh crap, what do I do? I think there's, even if the pitching coach, he wants to take cover and call the pitches, I think it's a responsible thing to do to allow those guys to call it in the fall, call it in particular situations. Just because if you do decide to give it over to them and they've never done it before, they are going to be scared to death. I mean, their eyes are going to be huge. They think that if they make one wrong call, if a guy hits a ball in the gap, it's like the end of the world. So you want guys to be comfortable with it, even if that's not what they do all the time.
Yeah, I like it. And I just, what I wrote down was odd even innings. So like I'm thinking fall scrimmages, we have a freshman and we start our first scrimmage and he's a little nervous. So instead of just saying, all right, you call the game, maybe our pitching coach gives him an idea on the odd innings. I'll call odd, you got even. So in the first inning, I'll give you kind of an idea of what we're going to do. And then I'll give you the even inning. And then
Mm-hmm.
I'll take it back the odd. I mean, that's what I'm thinking right now out loud, is that's a way to kind of work your way into this. And then the discussions after each inning. Hey, what'd you think there? I know you were calling fastballs and, the guy fouled it straight back. He just missed it. Why did you? That's the discussions we got to have during the game, and then post is those conversations have to take place.
Yeah, well, the communication is absolutely key. And I think I shared a story. I got another story for you, but one of my first years at ETSU, we had an older catcher and we had a younger pitcher, and we started our fall season early, so we had to start scrimmaging. This particular pitcher and catcher hadn't worked together yet. Well, the pitcher's going out and getting shelled, and we're like, "What's going on? What's happening?" He's like, "Coach, he keeps calling a slider. Like, I don't throw a slider, I throw a curveball. So I'm trying to throw a slider." And he's a freshman. He's thinking like, "I don't want to be shaking
Yeah.
the senior catcher off, because that's not what you do your second week of school." So he's throwing a pitch that he doesn't even throw, and he's getting shelled, and it's like, guys, we got to communicate a little bit better than that, So it was eye-opening as a coach, and it's kind of embarrassing as a coach, but it is a good learning point that, yeah, you got to communicate. You got to talk to guys before the game, during the game, after the game, in the bullpens, any chance you get. You just have to make sure you're doing a good job with that. But overall, like I said, I do agree that pitch calling is an area that it's changed. I mean, 20, 30 years ago, the catcher called the pitches, and that was it. And now that's a skill that they're having to relearn. I think, Tom, I've taken about an hour of your time or so I know we're kind of getting to the end. Is there anything else that comes to your mind off the top of your head that you'd like to discuss, or you think that maybe as Manzan, we got to talk about that? This is one thing that's changed that we just haven't talked about yet. We haven't spoken much about throwing, even maybe coaching philosophies. We haven't talked a ton about that. And again, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth. I was just curious before we wrap things up, if there was anything that any topic you wanted to hit.
Well, I think one is, and it's been helpful to our catchers, is to allow them to have a favorite player. Like we have our guys, you got to give me a current and a former catcher and give me kind of a little book report. Nothing major. You can go on Wikipedia, and I want you to write some stuff down about this guy. So I want a current guy, then I want someone older so that they can learn about the history of this game and how it's evolved from the equipment to, they go on in video and watch a video of the guy and watch a stance. I think that's important for the knowledge base of our catchers because we want them to be well-rounded in so many areas. I think with the throwing aspect and the philosophy for our catchers, we give them a lot because our number one philosophy is be an extension of the head coach. I want them to be aggressive throwing the bags. I think that's important. That if a kid's got an arm, and if he doesn't, he just shows he's got some aggressiveness. And when he throws one down the line at third, and you're going, oh, come on, what are we doing? Well, we don't say anything when he picks the guy off at third. We're not like, what are you doing there? Now we're like, that baby, way to make a game happen. I think allowing them that freedom to be aggressive out there, I think is extremely important. So we got to work different arm angles, so we a lot of times we play catch, and I used to be one of those guys, like, hey, you got to make sure you're throwing it like a catcher. Well, no, you got to throw like an athlete. And so I think that's important for guys to remember. If there were a couple little nitpicky things, Zan, here's one. I've seen this more and more where a guy gets a ball and it bounces off his body and it's no more than 3 feet away. And the guy does one of these. Go get the ball. The umpire should never have to go get a ball. Yeah. And it's almost like we're prima donnas where it's like, give me a ball. And the ball's like right next to us. You talk about writing someone off. Right there, that'll do it for me. Because I think that's his mindset and his mentality. And I think that's bad for the culture of the team when you got a guy back there who can't go 3-4 yards away and pick up a ball and get it to the umpire or toss it to that other dugout. The other thing for me, and this is more generally philosophical, I'd love for us to get baseballs and get them back to the pitcher without throwing it around the diamond. We've got to change how we do showcases. No question about that. We have to do better ways of evaluating. And by the way, right now with this virus, we got to find ways to do it on video. We've got to be better about how we're going to present our catchers. But for me, the ball throwing it around the infield is a complete waste of time. I like to get the ball, get it back to the pitcher, and let's get the game moving. Get it out at first, get it back to the pitcher, let's get the game moving. I see more balls that get thrown away. It takes time. I see balls go to third, short, second. Why not first? If we're going to do all the infielders, why not left, right, and center? They're all part of the game. And I'm like, let's speed this game up. Major League Baseball is finding ways to do it. Let's see how we can speed our guys up in this game and not let them just walk around and just play the game laissez-faire. But let's understand that this game can be sped up a little bit. It's still a game with no time, but I think that what we're asking of our guys and how to go about it with their passion and energy, we could ramp up just a little bit.
Yeah, I'm with you as far as pet peeves go, man. There's nothing worse than a guy blocks a ball and it's right here, and then he puts his hand up and just goes like that.
Yeah.
I remember first year in pro ball, that was a shift for me. If a guy threw a fastball and spiked it and you picked it, you know, the umpire wanted you to hand it to him, swap balls. Professional baseball, they don't want balls with scuffs, you know. But for me, I'm used to playing in college, and I'm thinking, man, I don't care what it looks like. I'm just going to throw it back and be fast. And like, no, you can't do that anymore. But you know, when you watch guys in high school and middle school, and it's like, go get the ball, man. It's not that hard.
Yes.
Bounce around a little bit,
Not
move around, have some energy.
Exactly.
I really like what you said about the showcases, and you're absolutely right. This is the perfect time if we're ever going to change, you know, how catching, you know, video recruiting videos or the showcasing is done. Man, what better time than right now? Everybody has time to rebuild their video or to re-edit it or whatever. You got the same footage. Let's just see more of this and less of this. So that's a really good point. And I'm probably going to follow up with you about that, and maybe we can put together some tips. You know, for guys to improve. That's a good idea. I think guys should work on. But Tom, man, like I said, it's been about an hour, and I know you got a lot going on, and I've got to get off here too. But I appreciate having you on. It's always a blast talking to you. Respect you, love what you do, love what you teach. And for the guys that don't know, like I said, your social media and stuff will have popped up on the screen by now. But if you want to let guys know where your camps are, what you're doing this summer, again, just let everybody know again.
Well, you know, the virus will let us know what the university will allow us to do. We do a camp here at Carson Newman University for middle school through high school. But obviously, we're in a waiting pattern to see if we can or can't do anything. So, that's about it. And Zan, I appreciate you, man. I love you. I love what you do. I love what you've done for me. You've helped me in more ways than I will ever repay you for. And I truly appreciate it. And like I said, you've been a mentor to me, watching what you do in this arena and outside the arena, and how you treat people and go about things has helped me as a person grow as well. So I appreciate all you've done.
Well, that's kind of you. It's probably too kind, so I definitely appreciate it. But Tom, thanks again for coming on, man. I appreciate it, and we'll definitely have to do this again and pick another topic and go off on some other things. So thanks for coming on. Enjoyed it, and I'll talk to you soon.